The first thing Lady Caroline Ashfield noticed as she stepped onto the frost-covered grounds of Whitmore Abbey was a silence that felt almost alive. It wasn't the gentle hush of winter in the countryside, it was heavier, deeper, as if the estate itself were holding its breath. Even the servants who appeared at the grand entrance moved with a strange, deliberate quiet, their soft footsteps barely disturbing the thick air. Caroline clutched her small reticule, feeling the chill bite at her fingers. At 19, she carried little more than her family's mounting debts and a resolve she had yet to fully test, but she had accepted this marriage for her family's sake, unaware that the estate would greet her with such a stifling, ghostly calm. Lady Caroline, a sharp, precise voice broke the stillness. A tall, stern woman emerged from the shadowed doorway. "I am Mrs. Hartwell, the housekeeper. His Grace awaits you in the library." Caroline followed, her eyes tracing the endless corridors lined with ancestral portraits. The long-dead faces stared down with judgment, their painted eyes as cold and unyielding as the marble floors beneath her. Whitmore Abbey was grand, no doubt, towering ceilings, gilded moldings, and furniture that seemed plucked from a museum, but there was a frostiness to it, as if warmth and laughter had been systematically banished over generations. When the library doors swung open, Caroline stopped, her breath catching. Towering shelves stretched toward the ceiling, heavy with books in every color, every size, their spines whispering forgotten stories. But it was the man in the center of the room who commanded her attention. Standing with his back to the windows, his broad shoulders framed by the pale winter light, he exuded power without a word. Duke Jonathan Whitmore turned, and Caroline's heart stumbled. He was younger than she expected, perhaps in his mid-30s, with dark hair untouched by grey and eyes the color of storm clouds. His beauty was striking, but beneath it, she sensed a loneliness that made the air around him seem almost fragile. He inclined his head in a formal bow, lips moving silently. Caroline's chest tightened. He was deaf. "Your Grace," she whispered, sinking into a careful curtsy. She wasn't sure if he could read lips or if he relied on some other method of understanding. His eyes, stormy and intense, seemed to pierce her very thoughts. After a moment, he turned to a desk and scrawled something onto paper before offering it to her. "Welcome to Whitmore Abbey, Lady Caroline. I trust your journey was pleasant. We have much to discuss regarding our arrangement and the children." His handwriting was precise, almost musical in its flow, the language of a man accustomed to conveying everything through ink rather than speech. Caroline looked up, unsure if she should speak or write in return. He sensed her hesitation and wrote again. "You may speak freely. I read lips with ease. If writing feels safer, that is fine as well." A warmth crept into her cheeks. I'm sorry," she murmured. "I don't know what's proper in this situation." A faint shadow of a smile flickered across the Duke's face. "There is no protocol. We must discover our own way." Before she could gather her thoughts, the library doors burst open, and 5 children tumbled inside, a whirlwind of curiosity and cautious energy. They moved quietly, like the house itself had taught them restraint, yet their eyes shone with life, all fixated on the woman who had suddenly become part of their world. The eldest, a girl of 15, paused mid-step, her gaze fixed on Caroline as if trying to measure the weight of the stranger who would now shape their days. The eldest girl, her dark hair pulled back neatly and her grey eyes sharp beyond her years, stepped forward and curtsied with a precision that made Caroline's heart tighten. "Lady Caroline," she whispered, her tone carefully measured. "I am Margaret. These are my brothers and sisters, Thomas, Elizabeth, William, and little Catherine." Caroline studied the 5 children standing before her. They were like miniature versions of their father, poised, controlled, and quietly assessing her every move. Their ages seemed to span from early childhood to mid-teens, yet each carried the same air of disciplined restraint, the mark of a household ruled by silence. "It's wonderful to meet you all," Caroline said, unsure of whether to speak more softly or project her voice. The hushed atmosphere made every word feel monumental. The Duke's pen moved swiftly across paper, providing guidance. "The children have learned to speak quietly. It helps me read lips, and it has become their habit." Caroline's chest tightened. These children, she realized, had been trained to curb the natural noises of childhood, not for discipline alone, but because their father could not hear their laughter. She felt a spark of resolve. "Well," she said, speaking in her usual tone, letting it fill the quiet room, "I am truly pleased to meet you. And I hope we can become friends." The children exchanged uncertain glances. This was different from anything they'd been taught, a new presence challenging the strict order of their lives. The youngest, a golden-haired girl with wide grey eyes, hesitated, then asked in a whisper so delicate it was almost lost, "Are you going to be our new mama?" Caroline's gaze moved from the child to the Duke, whose expression remained unreadable, then back to the children. Their mother was gone, and here she was, expected to step into a void that seemed impossible to fill. I will be your father's wife, Caroline said gently. And if you'll let me, I want to be your friend too. I cannot replace your mother, but together, perhaps we can become a family. Little Catherine, no more than 5, regarded her with solemn seriousness. Papa doesn't talk to us much anymore, she said quietly. Not since Mama went to heaven. Will you talk to us? The words struck Caroline like a physical weight. She looked at the Duke, noticing the subtle tension in his shoulders, the tight line of his jaw. Yes, she said firmly, meeting each child's eyes. I will talk to you. I will listen to you. And I think it's time this house remembered what it sounds like when children are allowed to be children. The Duke's head lifted sharply, his storm-grey eyes flickering with something Caroline couldn't immediately name: shock, hope, perhaps the first stirrings of relief. For the first time, the rigid silence of Whitmore Abbey felt as though it might be broken. That the stories take me to other worlds, Caroline said warmly, smiling at Margaret. Adventures, mysteries, histories, anything that lets me see life from someone else's eyes. Margaret's grey eyes lit up with a flicker of excitement, and one by one the other children leaned in slightly, their curiosity breaking through the careful quiet they had maintained all day. I've always loved tales of faraway lands, Thomas admitted in a soft voice, but mostly I read about inventions and science. Papa liked it when we tried to make things ourselves. Caroline nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of admiration and determination. Then tomorrow, perhaps we can explore the library together. You can show me your favorite books, and I'll show you some of mine. We can learn from each other. A small ripple of smiles passed among them. Even little Catherine clutched her fork a little less rigidly, clearly sensing that Caroline's presence meant more than just a new routine, it was a promise of attention, care, and companionship. The Duke, watching quietly at the head of the table, wrote a note and handed it to Caroline. I admire the way you speak to them. They seem lighter when you are near. Caroline felt a gentle warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just about enforcing rules or managing a household, it was about breathing life back into a family that had learned to survive in silence. I think, she said aloud, letting her voice carry just enough to be heard, that we're going to need a lot of stories, a lot of laughter, and maybe even a few surprises along the way. For the first time that evening, a hint of genuine curiosity appeared in the Duke's eyes. The children, sensing a change in the air, exchanged glances, each holding a spark of hope that maybe, finally, their home could feel alive again. As the candles flickered and the shadows danced along the polished walls of Whitmore Abbey, Caroline realized that this was only the beginning. The silence was still present, yes, but it was no longer absolute. Between whispered conversations, shared laughter, and the careful bridging of gaps, she could feel the first threads of connection forming. This family, fractured and burdened by grief, was about to learn that communication wasn't limited to words alone, and that sometimes, love could speak louder than any sound. Creativity, for the chance to be themselves. They've been living under rules meant to protect you, but in the process, they've been denied the simple joys of childhood. I won't let that continue. The Duke's grey eyes narrowed, his jaw tight, but Caroline didn't flinch. She had seen the restraint, the fear, the muted excitement in his children, and she knew that protecting their spirits would require courage as much as tact. They must learn consideration, he wrote, but there are limits. Too much noise, too much excitement, it unsettles the house, and me. I understand, Caroline said calmly. And I will honor your needs, but I will also honor theirs. They deserve laughter, music, and freedom to explore their talents. We can strike a balance. They can thrive without threatening your peace. He studied her, storm-grey eyes sharp, searching for a hint of compromise or defiance. Caroline met his gaze steadily. I'm not asking permission to disregard your wishes. I'm asking you to trust me to guide them with care, and to help them find joy again. That's part of being their stepmother, isn't it? For a long moment, the silence stretched between them. Then, ever so slightly, his posture softened. It wasn't a concession, not yet, but it was the first crack in the walls he had built around his family, and himself. Caroline sensed the weight of the task ahead. She would need patience, creativity, and unwavering determination to heal this household, to restore laughter and expression, and perhaps even coax the Duke back from the isolation his grief and guilt had imposed. She stepped closer, letting her voice remain steady but warm. We can create a home that honors both you and the children. One where love, curiosity, and laughter are not threats, but gifts we share together. The Duke's pen hovered over the paper again, and for the first time, Caroline felt that he was truly considering the possibility, not just of compromise, but of change. The silence of Whitmore Abbey was not broken yet, but in that tense exchange, a small spark of hope had been lit. Outside, the wind rattled the ancient windows, but inside, Caroline resolved that no matter how long it took, she would be the one to teach this family that sometimes, the most important sounds are the ones that come from the heart. Sketches of Bridges, William's budding portraits, little Catherine's whispered love of song, all of it lingered in Caroline's mind like small sparks in a dark room. These were not just children, they were lives full of potential, waiting for someone brave enough to nurture them. She paused in the corridor outside her chambers, taking a deep breath. The silence of Whitmore Abbey pressed in around her, heavy and almost suffocating, yet Caroline felt a flicker of determination ignite within her. This was more than a house to manage, it was a family to save. And saving a family meant reaching through layers of grief, fear, and guilt, not with commands, but with patience, courage, and an unwavering belief in their worth. Caroline thought of the Duke, his storm-grey eyes shadowed with pain, and she realized that beneath his armor of silence and restraint was a man who still loved his children fiercely, even if he had forgotten how to show it. The task before her was monumental, to coax him back from the edge of his grief without shattering the fragile trust she was beginning to build with his children. As she stepped into her chambers, the candlelight flickering against the walls, Caroline made herself a silent promise. She would not shrink from this challenge. She would teach the children that their voices mattered, that joy could exist even in sorrow, and that love, careful, patient, relentless love, could bridge even the deepest divides. Pulling a chair to the window, she looked out across the frost-kissed grounds of Whitmore Abbey. The night was quiet, but she could imagine laughter echoing here someday, music spilling from the drawing room, whispered poetry readings by candlelight, and the children discovering who they truly were without fear. For the first time since arriving, Caroline allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with tension, misunderstanding, and grief, but it was a road she was ready to walk. Whitmore Abbey had been silent for too long. And she, Lady Caroline Ashfield, was determined to make sure that silence would one day give way to life, to love, and to the sound of a family finally healing. At the table, their small faces still carrying the residue of yesterday's caution, but there was a spark in their eyes as they noticed Caroline entering. The aroma of fresh honey cakes and fruit greeted them, and for the first time in days, a tiny ripple of excitement passed between them. "Good morning," Caroline said warmly, keeping her tone steady and bright. "I thought we might try something a little different today. Just a small treat to start the day, right?" The children's whispers of delight were almost audible as they peeked at the spread before them, golden honey cakes stacked neatly, strawberry jam glistening in bowls, and colorful slices of fruit arranged like miniature gardens. Even little Catherine clutched her fork with wide-eyed anticipation, as if tasting joy for the first time in a long while. Margaret leaned forward slightly. "Did you make this, Lady Caroline?" she asked in a soft, awed voice. "I had some help," Caroline admitted with a smile. "But it was done with you all in mind. Today, breakfast is about happiness as much as nourishment." Thomas's eyes brightened as he reached for a honey cake. "It smells amazing," he whispered, almost forgetting to be cautious. Caroline took a seat beside them, allowing the warmth of the room and the children's tentative smiles to soothe her own nerves. "You know," she said, "your mother loved mornings like this. She believed the start of the day could set the tone for everything that followed. Perhaps we can honor her by bringing a little joy into our mornings, too." Elizabeth's hand hovered over a slice of fruit before she carefully selected it. "Mama, she taught us poems, didn't she?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Caroline said softly. "And I would love for you to share them with me sometime. Maybe after breakfast, we can sit together and read a little poetry." Little Catherine's golden curls bounced as she tried to contain her excitement. Can we sing too?" she asked, eyes wide with hope. Caroline's heart clenched at the innocence in her voice. "Yes," she said firmly, "we can sing. Music is meant to be heard, and it belongs to you as much as anyone. We'll make space for it here." As the children began to eat, their whispered conversations growing slightly louder, Caroline noticed the subtle shift in the household. Even without the Duke present, the air felt lighter, more alive. For the first time, she felt the faintest sense that Whitmore Abbey could be restored, not just as a grand estate, but as a home filled with laughter, curiosity, and love. Caroline watched the children savor their breakfast, their cautious smiles blossoming into genuine delight, and felt a surge of determination. This was the beginning, not just of mornings filled with honey cakes and bright fruit, but of the journey to heal hearts, to restore joy, and to teach a family that love could be stronger than silence, and brighter than grief. The work ahead would be hard, and the Duke's walls were not easily breached, but Caroline knew one thing clearly: she would not allow this family's voices, dreams, or laughter to remain suppressed any longer. Today, the first small victories had been won, and with each one, hope began to bloom inside Whitmore Abbey. Weighing her words carefully. "It hurts," Margaret admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we understand why he did it. He loved Mama so much. He's still hurting." Caroline stepped closer, lowering her voice to match the tenderness in Margaret's tone. "I understand his pain, truly. But love isn't something that disappears when someone we care about is gone. It stays with us, and it can give us the courage to keep living fully. That includes letting yourself and your children remember happiness without guilt. Margaret looked down, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. We've been careful. We don't want to make him sad. We try not to be too loud or too happy. That's a lot of weight for children to carry, Caroline said softly, her heart aching for them. You shouldn't have to suppress your joy because of his grief. Part of my job, part of what I hope we can do together, is to bring back the balance. To show him that loving you, seeing you happy, doesn't dishonor anyone. It honors the life you shared with your mother, and the love he still carries for her. Margaret's grey eyes met Caroline's, a flicker of hope shimmering in their depths. Do you really think he could? I do, Caroline said firmly. But it will take time. Patience. Gentle persistence. And you'll need to let him see that it's safe to feel again. That happiness doesn't erase love or memory, it celebrates it. The girl nodded slowly, a small weight lifting from her shoulders. I think we can try, she murmured. Caroline smiled, the warmth spreading through her chest. Good. That's all I ask. Step by step, we'll bring life back into this house. And I promise, Margaret, you won't have to hide your laughter or your dreams anymore. Together, they turned to look at the bare walls of the library. It was a stark reminder of the Duke's grief, yes, but also a canvas. A place where new memories could be made, where love could grow again, where children could rediscover the joy they had been taught to hide. Caroline knew it wouldn't be easy. The Duke's heart was guarded, his pain still raw. But she also knew this family had resilience, and now, with gentle courage and unwavering determination, she would help them reclaim not just the silence of the Abbey, but the music, the laughter, and the love that had been missing for far too long. The Duke standing in the doorway, his grey eyes wide, fixed on the scene before him. For a heartbeat, Caroline thought he might erupt in anger. After all, this was the very indulgence he had spent years forbidding. But instead, he simply stood there, rigid, absorbing the music, the voices, the laughter that he had convinced himself he could no longer be part of. The children froze instantly, caught between joy and fear. Papa, Margaret whispered again, her voice barely audible over the lingering notes of Caroline's melody. The Duke's gaze softened, just a fraction, as if the sound of their laughter, the strains of music, were breaking through some barrier he had built around his grief. His lips pressed into a thin line, and he slowly lowered himself into an armchair nearby, still silent, still watching, but no longer completely closed off. Caroline continued to play, gently, letting the music fill the room without any expectation. She glanced at the children, encouraging them with quiet gestures. Elizabeth's voice rose with more confidence now, Thomas tapped lightly on the edge of the piano bench in rhythm, William's violin added richness, and little Catherine hummed along, oblivious to her father's presence. It was awkward at first, this reunion with Joy, but gradually the room seemed to breathe again. The sun slanting through the curtains caught the dust in the air, sparkling like tiny stars, and Caroline felt a quiet triumph swell inside her. Finally, the Duke reached for one of the empty music stands and lifted it as if drawn by the invisible threads of memory. He traced the sheet music with a trembling finger, his eyes misting as he touched the notes his wife had once taught their children to play. Caroline felt the moment delicately shift. The man who had lived in silence, who had believed that joy was forbidden, was not shutting them out entirely. He was remembering. He was feeling. And for the first time in years, he was present, not just physically, but emotionally, drawn back into the heart of his family by the music that had always belonged to them all. The children dared to look at him now, tentative smiles blossoming as if testing the water. And when William played a short, bold flourish on his violin, the Duke's hand twitched slightly, a silent acknowledgement, a trace of pride, and perhaps, forgiveness. Caroline's fingers hovered above the keys as she whispered to herself, "This is the beginning." The music lingered, warm and insistent, and in that golden afternoon light, Whitmore Abbey felt less like a house of ghosts and more like a home, ready once again to hold laughter, love, and the fragile, unstoppable rhythm of life. See the flicker of the man he had once been, the father, the husband, the man who had known how to give and receive love without fear. The contrast between that man and the one who now sat before her, withdrawn and haunted, was almost unbearable. "You miss her," Caroline said softly, her voice steady but full of understanding. "You miss the life you had with her, the joy you shared, the family you loved." The Duke's hand tightened around the miniature portrait. His grey eyes, so often stormy and impenetrable, shimmered with a glint of unshed tears. "Every day," he wrote finally, the words deliberate, each stroke weighted with grief. "And I cannot undo what happened. I cannot bring her back." "No," Caroline said gently. "But you can honor her memory by loving your children, by letting them feel joy and music again, by showing them the father you once were." That love hasn't disappeared, it's only been buried under pain. The Duke's gaze dropped to the desk, lingering on the portrait, then to Caroline's eyes. There was a long silence, heavy with emotion, yet strangely intimate. For the first time since she had arrived at Whitmore Abbey, Caroline felt that she was not confronting an unyielding fortress of grief, but a man who was only waiting for permission to remember who he once was. You fear that happiness will betray her memory, Caroline continued. But joy doesn't erase love. Laughter doesn't dissen a grief. Your children need both, you need both. He wrote slowly, hesitantly, as if each word was a risk. I have been afraid. Afraid that feeling again would make the pain unbearable. Afraid that if I let myself love them fully, I will lose them too. Caroline leaned forward, her voice gentle but insistent. You won't lose them. You can't. They are yours, your love shaped them, protected them, and now it can guide them again. Let them see you as their father, not just a shadow of what you have lost. The Duke's hand trembled slightly as he put down the pen. For a long moment, he said nothing, only stared at Caroline with a mixture of awe, fear, and something that looked very much like hope. Caroline knew this was the fragile beginning of a bridge back to his heart, a bridge she would help him cross, one step at a time. And as the firelight flickered across the study, she realized that even in the deepest silence, love could speak louder than any music. Tomorrow, she said softly, almost to herself, we will fill this house with music again. And you will be there with them, just as you always were meant to be. The Duke's grey eyes met hers, and for the first time, they didn't look stormy. They looked like the man who had once chased laughter through gardens, who had danced and sung and loved without reservation. And Caroline, watching him finally allow a small, almost imperceptible exhale of relief, knew that the first cracks in the walls of grief had begun to form. That fragile, extraordinary sense of hope that comes when walls begin to fall and hearts start to open. She felt the weight of grief lift slightly, not erased, not forgotten, but softened by connection and courage. The firelight flickered across the Duke's grey eyes, now tinged with warmth instead of storm, and Caroline understood that the first steps toward healing had been taken. For the first time, she saw not a distant, broken man, but a father capable of love again, a husband willing to let the past inform, but not imprison, the present. And in that quiet, tender moment, surrounded by the stillness of the Abbey, Caroline realized something profound. Love, even after loss, was not a danger, it was the only thing strong enough to save them all. Tomorrow, the music room would sing again. Laughter would echo through the halls. Lessons would be lived, not just endured. And little by little, the Duke would learn that to protect his children did not mean shielding them from joy, but walking beside them through it. Tonight, though, there was only this, the soft crackle of the fire, the unspoken understanding between two people who had glimpsed the possibility of renewal, and the quiet, radiant hope that life, even after tragedy, could still be beautiful. Fear, the Duke admitted, his voice low but steady. They deserve more than silence and restraint. They deserve life. They deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be encouraged. Caroline felt her heart swell. This was more than a small victory, it was a turning point. The man who had withdrawn behind grief and guilt was beginning to reclaim his place as a father, not perfectly, but fully present. She reached across the table and took his hand, a silent acknowledgement of partnership and trust. The children, sensing the shift, relaxed into their natural selves. William unrolled a sheet of his drawings, Margaret read a short poem aloud, Elizabeth recited her French lessons with confidence, and little Catherine hummed a tune that had been forgotten in the quiet of the past years. The Duke watched, nodding, smiling faintly, sometimes pausing to ask a question or offer encouragement, his presence radiating love instead of fear. Caroline knew this was only the beginning. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, and the shadow of grief would always linger. But for the first time, Whitmore Abbey felt like a home alive with possibility. Music, laughter, learning, and love, these were returning, not as echoes of what had been, but as living, breathing realities that the family would build together. As breakfast came to an end, the Duke looked across the table at Caroline, his grey eyes steady and filled with something new. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice gaining strength with each word. "For reminding me that life is worth embracing again." Caroline smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. "We'll do it together," she said softly. "Every step of the way." And in that shared moment of understanding and courage, the Abbey itself seemed to exhale, as if acknowledging that its halls would once again echo with the music of hope and the laughter of a family reunited in heart and spirit. Steady but full of feeling. We've already built trust, understanding, and a family. Those are the foundations of something real. Love can grow from here, quietly, patiently, but with all the strength it needs. The Duke reached out and took her hand, his touch both tentative and certain. "Then let us take that journey together," he said, his voice carrying a new warmth, a promise. Not just as husband and wife, but as partners in raising our children, in sharing their joys and sorrows, in creating a home worth remembering. Caroline smiled, feeling the weight of the past 3 days, the struggles, the confrontations, the small victories, settle into something profoundly hopeful. "We will," she said, her eyes shining. Every step of the way. Outside, the winter light faded into evening, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted gardens. Inside Whitmore Abbey, the fire crackled softly, echoing the warmth now rekindled in its halls. The music of healing, of courage, of love, had begun. And for the first time in years, the family sat together, not just under one roof, but united in heart, in hope, and in the quiet, enduring power of being present for one another. For Caroline, for Jonathan, for the children, and for the memory of Isabella, life at Whitmore Abbey had truly begun again. A full heart, marveling at how natural it all seemed now, the ease of laughter, the warmth of touch, the effortless rhythm of a family finally in tune with itself. No longer were they timid, measured, afraid of drawing disapproval. They were alive, thriving, and joyous in each other's presence. Thomas bounded over to show his latest engineering sketch to the Duke, who bent to examine it, asking questions with genuine curiosity and praise that lit the boy's face. Margaret recited a poem she had written that morning, Elizabeth demonstrated a French dialogue she had perfected, and William played a lively tune on his violin, all while Caroline guided the harmonies on the piano. The Duke, silent at first, allowed himself to be swept into the moment. He clapped along, nodded at clever turns in the melody, and even laughed, a deep, rich sound that had been absent for far too long. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't need to be. It was alive. It was real. It was love expressed in the purest form. Caroline felt Jonathan glance at her, a soft smile of gratitude and wonder on his face, and she knew that he had finally let go of the walls that had kept him distant. He had embraced the chaos and joy of family life, understanding that presence mattered more than perfection, that love mattered more than fear. As the morning sun filled the room, the music swelled, a living testament to resilience, to forgiveness, to hope renewed. And in that moment, Whitmore Abbey wasn't just a house restored, it was a home reborn, alive with the symphony of hearts beating in harmony, a family fully returned to itself. Caroline leaned back, her fingers resting on the keys, and whispered softly to no one in particular, this is why we never stop trying. And for the first time in years, every note, every voice, every laugh rang with a promise, that love, once lost, could be found again, and once found, it could grow beyond anything they had dared to imagine. Stirring, now awakened by gentle hands and patient hearts. Each word Elizabeth spoke seemed to ripple across the picnic blanket, touching not just Caroline but the Duke as well, whose grey eyes softened with every line. He may not have heard the music of the poem, but he felt its rhythm in the careful cadence of his daughter's voice, in the expressions on her face, in the pride that radiated from her posture. When Elizabeth finished, the Duke reached over and squeezed her hand gently, a silent acknowledgement of her talent and courage. Margaret clapped softly, while Catherine and William joined in with delighted laughter, their joy infectious. Caroline's chest swelled with a quiet pride. This was the true reward of patience and love, a family no longer fractured, but alive with confidence, curiosity, and care for one another. The afternoon sun glinted across the lake as the children raced to skim stones across the frozen surface, shouting and cheering, inventing new games, and inventing ways to include their father. The Duke followed at their side, learning the signals, adapting to their needs, letting go of old fears, and allowing himself to be present in the small, perfect moments that comprised a lifetime of happiness. Caroline leaned back on the blanket, watching the scene unfold, and whispered to herself, this is what it means to love, to risk, to trust, to heal. She glanced at Jonathan, whose eyes met hers across the space of shared understanding, and she saw the same thought mirrored in him, that a life rebuilt on courage and care, even after unimaginable loss, could be not just endured, but celebrated. The lake reflected the golden light of late afternoon, and the family, together and whole, became its own quiet symphony, a harmony of laughter, whispered encouragements, and the gentle language of hearts no longer afraid to hope. In that moment, Caroline knew that Whitmore Abbey would never again be silent, for its walls now contained the music of love, trust, and family renewed. This story isn't just about romance, it's about resilience, healing, and the courage to open your heart even when life has taught you to be cautious. Caroline and Jonathan's journey shows us that love can truly speak louder than silence, and that even in the darkest times, hope can take root and bloom. Which part of their transformation resonated with you the most? Was it the moment Caroline challenged the Duke in the music room, or the first time he joined his children in laughter and play? Share your thoughts below.